get to read chapter 12. My brother Sam is dead. And the Roman numerals are XII. That's where you get the TV channel WXII. Stands for what? 12. Channel 12. Isn't that cool? Okay, so here we are, page 164. In June of that year, 1777, we found out that Father was dead. He had been dead for a month. It had happened pretty much as we guessed it. He had been sent to a prison ship in New York. There was one funny thing about it, though. It wasn't a rebel prison ship. It was a British one. We never did figure out how that happened. It just had come out of the confusion of war somehow. Boys and girls, write down, why is that strange that Father died on a British prison ship? Why is that strange? So proud of you. Yes, excellent. You guys that are writing it right away show a real thorough understanding of the story. If it's strange that Father died on a prison ship, hopefully you're automatically thinking, very good, not only was he wasn't necessarily British, but he was loyal to the British. Father was a Tory. Very good. So he's a loyalist. So isn't it strange? Don't you guys feel frustrated that that's where he died? It doesn't make any sense. Can you imagine being Mr. Meeker's son, knowing that's how he felt and that's where he died? It just doesn't make any sense. Top of page 65. The prison ships were terrible places. Filthy and baking hot in summer and freezing in winter. And of course, nothing to eat but slop. The worst part was disease. If anybody got sick with anything serious, everybody on the ship was liable to get it. And that's what happened to Father. They had an epidemic of cholera on the prison ship he had been on. And about 40 or 50 people had died from it. And he'd been one of them. They buried him someplace on Long Island Sound, but we weren't sure where. Mother said, after the war, we'll find where he lies and have a headstone made for him. But I don't even think she believed we'd be able to do that. We found all this out from one of the men who had been taken away during the raid on Reading that spring. He had been put on the same ship and he had been with Father when he died. Before he died, he asked me to make sure you knew what happened. He said, tell them that I love them and say that I forgive Sam. He's a brave boy, but he's headstrong. The last thing he said was, and now I go to enjoy the freedom war has brought. But Father wasn't the only one who died. 2 days after we found out about Father, Betsy Reed came down to the tavern. I gave her a pot of beer. Did you hear about Jeremiah Sanford? She said. No, he's dead. Jerry, he's dead? Nobody understands it. They put him on a prison ship and he got sick and he died within 3 weeks. It doesn't make any sense. You could understand why they took Mr. Rogers or Captain Betts, but why imprison a 10-year-old boy? Oh, what harm could he have done them? The war has turned men into animals, Mother said. They sunk his body in Long Island Sound in a weighted sack, so his parents can't even get him back. I don't understand it. What did they want him for? They're animals now. They're all beasts, Mother said. I think they are, Betsy said. Sam should have come home. It was the first time I'd ever heard her say anything against Sam and his ideals. I told him that, I said. He said he had taken a pledge with some friends to stick it out until they won. Does he still think they're gonna win? Betsy said. Well, maybe they will. Betsy shook her head. Even Father says things are bad for the Patriots. I looked at her curiously. Don't you want them to win? I don't care who wins anymore. I just want it to be over. Sam wouldn't like you to talk like that. I don't care. When I see him, I'm going to tell him for 3 years they've been fighting and all we've had is death and hunger. Your father is dead. Jeremiah Sanford is dead. Sam Barlow is dead. David Fairchild is dead. Stephen Fairchild was wounded and more. My mother nodded. Right at the beginning, life said it would be that way. He said, in war, the dead pay the debts for the living, but he didn't think he would have to pay himself. So Father had forgiven Sam. I think Mother did, although she never said so. But for myself, I wasn't sure. I knew I'd be glad to see him and have him at home, but still, it felt like it was partly his fault that Father had died. Oh, he hadn't captured Father or thrown him in a prison ship or given him collar or anything like that, but he was fighting on their side, and I couldn't easily forget about that. Yet, of course, it was a British prison ship he had died on. It seemed to me that everybody was to blame. And I decided that I wasn't going to be on anybody's side anymore. Neither one of them was right. Summer passed and it became winter once more, and then people were suffering worse than ever from want. How can you suffer from want, boys and girls? Write down something that would create that suffering. Suffering from want. What does that mean? Give me an item or a noun that you would suffer. You're suffering from want. Very good. Good. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. I'm seeing most everyone write food. And then what'd you write? Lonely? I think that's a good one to suffer from, because you could suffer from not having your family members, can't you? Beautiful, Nina. Suffer from sickness. Suffer from the results of war. Not having food, not having supplies. Water may be more difficult to come by, but I think that would be one of the last things. Maybe the cold. Maybe you don't have quite the comforts that you had. So do you see all of these things cause one? All of these things as a result of war cause one to suffer from want. Andrew, I don't think that's a good idea. Luckily, I'm at the top of page 168. Luckily, there wasn't any more fighting around Reading. Anyway, in the winter, they didn't fight much. Nobody liked to fight in the cold. And when there was snow on the ground, it was hard to march and easy to get sick. Mallory, can you do that later? The Continental Army was encamped at a place called Valley Forge, out in Pennsylvania somewhere. We didn't know whether Sam was there or not. From what we'd heard, they were practically starving and hadn't had any clothes. I was just as glad. It made me hope that the rebels were at the end of their rope and would have to give up pretty soon and end this terrible war. Boys and girls, the end of their rope is a type of figurative language. Does anyone remember what that is? It's a tough one. End of their rope. Are they literally hanging from a rope at the end of the rope about to fall? Michaela, what do you think?
Maybe it means like they're almost done and there's nobody left.
They can't take much more. They're almost done and there's nobody left. That is what the figurative language is describing. But what type of figurative language is that? I see some of you are turning around. What type of figurative language is that? When it uses words to express something else. Very good. It's an idiom. Like let the cat out of the bag. Raining cats and dogs. Yes, that's not really, they're not saying they're hanging at the end of a rope. Okay? But they're just about to lose. There's not much more they can take. I didn't even, in the middle, page 168, I didn't even mind that Sam might be suffering with cold and hunger. It would serve him right. We were pretty hungry ourselves. Sam began writing us letters every once in a while, every 2 or 3 months, especially after he'd heard Dad had died. He didn't tell us where he was in his letters. Mostly, they'd be about places he had been. Sometimes Betsy Reed would get a letter from him too, and she'd come down and tell us about it. So, time passed. The year 1777 ended and 1778 began. Spring came, and then summer and fall, and we harvested. Oh, how I hated the war. All of life was like running on a treadmill, which surprised me because I didn't think they had treadmills back then. You know,
Maybe it's
so
like
that
a different version.
I'm wondering if it's a different kind of version, of something else they would think of. I was 14. I should have been going to school all this while and learning something. Maybe by this time, I would have begun to think about going to New Haven and study at Yale. I wasn't much interested in Latin or Greek, but in the last couple of years, I learned a lot about buying and selling, and I wanted to study calculating and surveying and the agricultural sciences. I thought I might have a career in business. I might apprentice myself to a merchant in New Haven or New York or even London to learn the art of trade. Sam owed it to me to come home and help Mother run the tavern for a couple of years while I started to make my way in the world. But until the war ended, there was nothing for me to do but tread water. Prices kept going on spiraling upward. Merchandise grew shorter and shorter in supply, and everybody seemed to be in debt. You couldn't refuse a hungry widow who had lost her husband in the war some cloth or molasses on credit, but then how could we pay for it with the merchandise ourselves? We couldn't get over to Verplanck's Point that fall. The rebels were holding all of the northern Westchester County, Peekskill, Verplanck's compound, all of it. There was no way for us to get any cattle through. There wasn't much cattle around anyway, and bit by bit, people had been slaughtering their own stock for food. However, Mother and I had been able to get a hold of 8 scrawny cows, mainly from people who owed us a lot of money. There wasn't much to them, but with food in short supply, I figured we could get a pretty good price for them if we could get them to a British commissary somewhere. Not that I cared which side we sold them to, but the British were the ones who had the money. They had the whole English Ecuador behind them, and the Continentals were paying off in commissary script, which could be totally worthless. So do you see why he wants to sell them to the British, right? Because
profit.
it was real money, so they could actually make a profit. I heard that the British commissary in White Plains was about 25 miles west across the New York state line. I figured I might be able to drive the cattle down there through the woods. It would be very risky, but better than going hungry. And we needed some money to buy goods and help keep this tavern and the store going. If the business died, we'd really be out of luck. Hunger is a pretty terrible thing. It's like going around all day with a nail in your shoe.
Ow.
Yes. Now there again is figurative language. When you compare one thing to another, what do we call that? Good, similes. And they use like. When you use like or as, it's a simile and not a metaphor. So if you think about it, would you ever compare being hungry to a nail?
Yes.
You would?
No.
But a nail in your shoe, the pain that it causes. Have you ever been, I don't know if any of us know that kind of hunger, that you go day in and day out with hardly anything to eat. But it does cause your stomach to hurt so intensely. I don't know that kind of hunger, luckily. I know, for just a couple hours, you know that pain. Multiply that by day in and day out. And that's why it's like a nail in your shoe. It just doesn't give up. It just causes so much discomfort. It's like going around all day with a nail in your shoe. You try to put it out of your mind, but you never really quite forget it. And when something reminds you of it, like reading about a big meal in a story or seeing a stack of bread, it really hurts. I mean, it just plain hurts. It makes you feel weak.
and you get sick easily too. And that winter, everybody had colds and went around sniffling most of the time. Most people got really sick. Some people got really sick, and then their families would have to scrape up extra food to feed them. Oh, I don't mean that people were dying of hunger. Who do we know that was dying of hunger? Think about another novel. Right. Many of the settlers. Exactly, they're eating cheese. All through November, I tried to find out about the British commissary, whether it really existed or not, and where it actually was. But I couldn't find out anything I really trusted. It was all rumors. The commissary was at White Plains. No, it wasn't at White Plains. It was at Hardship. Yes, it was at White Plains after all, but the rebels had it under siege. And so forth. I didn't want to go until I was sure, and if I ran to the rebels, I'd lose the cattle and probably be put in prison myself. It was only worth the risk if I were sure where the commissary was. Otherwise, we might as well just eat the cattle ourselves. So that was the situation on December 3rd, 1778, when Sam came back to Reading. That morning, he walked in the tavern. He looked thin and so tired. There were black circles under his eyes, and his uniform was torn in about 6 places. He had lost his belt and was wearing a piece of rope around his waist, and his hat wasn't an army hat, but just an ordinary fur cap. But he was glad to be home, and he was grinning. "Hello, everybody," he said. Mother was out in the kitchen, and I'd been stoking up the fire. "Sam!" I shouted. "Mother, Sam's here!" She burst into the tavern and began to hug him, and I hugged him too. And when he crouched down in front of the fire and ate a bowl of porridge with honey that Mother brought him, "This is the first time I've been warm in weeks," he said. So we asked him all of the natural questions, where he had been, where he was going, and so forth. "I'm going to be in Reading for a while. General Putnam is bringing a couple of regiments here for winter encampment. We're going up to Lonetown and hole up into the spring." "What's the idea of that?" "The rumor is that we're supposed to be situated to move either west to the Hudson or south to Long Island Sound in case of a British attack at either place. Some say we're mainly here to watch over the magazines at Middletown. I don't know. Those are the rumors, but we're building huts, so I guess we'll be here for a while." "How'd you get off?" "I had a bit of luck. Colonel Parsons, Samuel Holden Parsons, that is, has moved into the Betts house. An adjutant came around and asked if any of us were from this area, and I said I was, and Colonel Parsons brought me into this town this morning to show him around." Sam grinned. "To the ladies mostly," I told him that there weren't any ladies in Reading except my mother and my girl. "Do you think Betsy's still his girl?"
No.
"I don't know. He said they would do. So, Mother, you'd better put on your best dress." Mother smiled, but I don't think she thought it was very funny. "You're so thin, Sam. And are the troops all starving?" "Oh, everybody in the country's hungry. It's going to be worse this winter, too. Have you got any cattle, Tim?" I was proud that he asked me instead of Mother. "8, but they're not much to look at. Butcher them and hide the meat, or sell it. You can get a good price for the hides from the troops. Sell what you can. I promise you the stock will be stolen." Mother frowned. "You mean your troops are stealing from your own people?" "A starving man will steal food from babies." He shook his head. "There's a lot you don't understand. All of us have seen good friends killed. I had a friend bayoneted, and it took him 6 hours to die, screaming all of the while. All we could do was hold his hand and wait. I saw a captain I loved blown in half by a cannonball. He was the best officer we ever had. He worried about his men. He put them first. He never ate before we were fed. And I've seen him go without to give his portion to a sick man." The redcoats blew him in half, right into 2 pieces. He shivered. "After a few things like that, you don't give a darn for anybody but your friends anymore. You will kill redcoats the way you butcher pigs. The troops know that Reading is a Tory town. So as far as they are concerned, taking cattle from the Tories is getting revenge. Sure, lots of them would steal from anybody, whether they were Tories or patriots or anything else. Some are as unscrupulous when they're as hungry or unscrupulous by nature, and they'll take whatever they can get away with. Of course, the majority of the men are honest and won't steal, but if they decide you're Tories, they'll have no compunction about taking your beef. And let me tell you, it's pretty easy to decide somebody's a Tory when you haven't eaten anything but hardtack and pork for weeks. I've done it myself. Sam, I won't apologize. War turns men into animals, Mother said. I was ashamed of it afterwards, Sam said, but not very, and my belly was full. Tim, butcher the cattle. Let the meat freeze and hide it in the loft under the hay until you need it. He glanced out the window toward the vet's house. I better go. Colonel Parsons may be waiting for me. Don't go yet, Sam. We've just seen you. I'll be around all winter, Mom. Maybe I can get attached to Colonel Parsons' staff. I'll try to get a pass if I can. Anyway, I can always slip out at night. It's risky. Colonel Parsons is not harsh, but General Putnam is in charge. He's a great patriot, but he's rough and tough on men who shirk their duty. 100 lashes for desertion, and if there's too much of it, I know he'll hang some people as an example. And that's the kind of man he is. But I'll be back to visit again, one way or another. Boys and girls, 2 pieces of foreshadowing that are going on here. And it's hard to know foreshadowing until you finish reading the next part, or the rest of the book. But one part has to do with stealing the cattle, and another part has to do with how rough and tough General Putnam is. And he'll use anyone as an example if something happens too much of it. Like if too much desertion occurs, he's going to use someone as an example. You're going to find out how those 2 foreshadowings come true, but I can tell you something. It has to do with the title of our book. So that's it for today.